The fall of Rome is traditionally portrayed as a sudden, overwhelming catastrophe. In 410 AD, a horde of savages supposedly poured out of the frozen north to shatter the gates of the Eternal City and burn the classical world to the ground. But the people wielding those torches, the Goths, had been Rome's immediate neighbors, steady trading partners, and most reliable hired soldiers for nearly 2 centuries. Generations of Gothic men grew up serving inside the imperial army. They fought under Roman commanders, mastered Roman logistics, and brought their wages home in imperial currency. They knew exactly how the empire's war machine operated because they were the ones operating it. The Goths marched south to secure a permanent, recognized place in the civilization they had bled to protect. It was the empire's own chronic arrogance that transformed its best students into its final judges. The relationship began in the early 3rd century along the Danube River. Rather than an impenetrable wall, the border functioned as a bustling zone of commerce, cultural exchange, and military recruitment. This proximity provided the Goths with a practical education in imperial power. They actively studied Roman infantry tactics and supply management while serving as mercenaries, even learning to launch sophisticated naval raids across the Black Sea. Stability relied on the empire honoring its promises of pay and subsidies. Instead, corrupt Roman governors frequently pocketed the gold meant for the tribes, treating Gothic delegations with open contempt. In 251 AD, this mistreatment sparked a full-scale rebellion. At the Battle of Abritus, Gothic forces lured the legions into a swamp and killed Emperor Decius, making him the first Roman ruler to die in battle against a foreign enemy. This victory proved that while the Roman administrative machine was highly valuable, its legions and its emperors could bleed just like anyone else. In the 370s, the arrival of the Huns from Central Asia pushed tens of thousands of Gothic refugees against the banks of the Danube. Trapped between a nomadic enemy and the Roman border, they petitioned Emperor Valens for asylum. Valens viewed Taurissus as an opportunity to gain new taxpayers and soldiers. He opened the border, and a massive population of refugees spilled into Roman territory. Imperial officials immediately exploited the situation. They embezzled food supplies and forced starving Gothic families to sell their own children into slavery in exchange for dog meat. This state-sanctioned cruelty manufactured an internal war. Desperate for survival, the Goths rose in rebellion, eventually drawing the emperor out for a decisive confrontation at Adrianople in 378 AD. The battle was a slaughter. Gothic cavalry annihilated 2/3 of the Eastern Roman field army and killed Emperor Valens in the chaos. Through sheer administrative greed, Rome had transformed a group of peaceful asylum seekers into the most lethal internal threat the empire had ever faced. The most famous figure of this era, Alaric, was a dual identity commander, a king to his people, but also a trained officer who had served years within the Roman military structure. Alaric repeatedly tried to negotiate for legal recognition and agricultural land for his people. He wanted to secure a future inside the empire's legal system, not destroy the state. The Roman court in Ravenna responded with a decade of broken treaties and political backstabbing. When the government repeatedly failed to honor its bargains, Alaric was pushed to his last resort. When Alaric finally entered Rome in 410 AD, his troops acted with relative restraint. They spared the Christian churches and religious sanctuaries, adhering to Alaric's orders to respect the faith they now shared with the Romans. Rome fell for the first time in 8 centuries because its own leadership was too fractured and too dishonest to honor a deal with its most essential allies. When Roman authority finally dissolved, Gothic kings stepped in to manage the remains of civilization. They functioned less like conquerors and more like a new tier of Roman administration. In Italy, King Theodoric preserved the Senate and civil administration. He used complex Roman-style engineering to restore public aqueducts and buildings, protecting the infrastructure that defined the classical world. The Visigoths in Spain achieved similar stability. They adopted Roman legal codes and converted to Catholicism, blending their own artistic traditions with Byzantine and Roman aesthetics to build a unified society. The people blamed for the collapse of the Roman West became the primary agents of its survival, ensuring its laws and administrative logic endured long after the empire was gone. This Gothic preservation was cut short in Italy. Emperor Justinian, ruling from Constantinople, launched a massive invasion to reclaim the western provinces from the people who were currently managing them. The resulting Gothic War devastated the Italian peninsula. Byzantine forces utilized scorched earth tactics that destroyed the very aqueducts and infrastructure the Goths had spent decades maintaining, leaving Italy a depopulated ruin. But in Spain, the Visigoths successfully maintained a unified kingdom for 3 centuries, right up until the Islamic invasion of 711 AD shattered their political state. The surviving nobility retreated into the jagged peaks of the Asturias Mountains in the far north. From this defensible terrain, they organized a resistance that would last for generations. This mountain resistance established the legal and cultural framework for the Reconquista, the centuries-long struggle for the peninsula that eventually concluded in 1492. The Goths exited history by providing the foundations for the future. Their laws and political identity served as the blueprint for the Spanish monarchs, who eventually reclaimed the peninsula and launched the age of global exploration.